It was the summer of 1996, a time of relative peace, when the internet was just a whisper of what it would become. In Surrey, British Columbia, a man named Blair Adams was living what seemed to be a normal life. He was 31 years old, a construction foreman known to his friends and family as a kind and reliable person. He had a steady job, a good reputation and a loving girlfriend, but something was wrong, terribly wrong. A shadow had fallen over Blair's life, a creeping dread that no one could quite see, but Blair could feel it in his bones. He was convinced someone was trying to kill him. This fear, this all-consuming paranoia, would send him on a frantic journey, a desperate flight for his life that would lead him thousands of miles away to a lonely roadside in Tennessee. What could make a man abandon everything he knew? What could push him to liquidate his assets, to buy gold and jewels, to drive through the night with a wild look in his eyes? Blair's friends noticed the change. He was agitated, restless. He told his mother that people were spreading rumors about him, that someone wanted him dead. He was certain his life was in danger. He even tried to get a restraining order, but the police told him there was no concrete threat, no evidence to support his claims. But for Blair, the threat was as real as the pavement beneath his feet, a dark premonition that something awful was about to happen. He knew he had to run, he just didn't know where to. His journey began with a series of frantic, almost nonsensical preparations. He emptied his safe deposit box, taking with him cash, gold bars, platinum, and a collection of expensive jewelry. It was a strange treasure for a man on the run, heavy and conspicuous. He quit his job. He told his girlfriend he would not be seeing her again. He was severing ties, cutting the strings that connected him to his old life, as if preparing for a final departure. The man his loved ones knew was disappearing before their very eyes, replaced by a stranger consumed by a nameless terror. A terror that would propel him southward down a long and winding road toward a destiny he could never have imagined. The question that haunts this story from its very first moments is simple yet profound. Was Blair Adams suffering from a sudden and severe paranoid delusion, a break from reality that sent him spiraling into chaos? Or was he right? Was there truly a hidden danger, a sinister plot that only he could see? The line between perception and reality began to blur, creating a fog of uncertainty that still hangs over this case today. His desperate escape was not just a physical journey across a continent, it was a journey into the heart of a mystery, a puzzle where every piece seemed to lead to more questions, more confusion, and ultimately to a violent and inexplicable end. The timeline of Blair Adams' final days is a frantic mosaic of fear and confusion. On July 5th, 1996, he began his preparations. He withdrew nearly all the money from his bank account, a significant sum. Then, he converted that cash into a peculiar portfolio of precious metals and foreign currency. He purchased thousands of dollars in US travelers' checks, along with German marks and Canadian currency. He also had with him a small fortune in gold bars and platinum. It was a strange collection for someone trying to disappear. Gold is not exactly easy to spend. It's heavy, it's noticeable. It was as if he was preparing for a total societal collapse, not just a personal escape. His first attempt to flee Canada was by air. On July 9th, he bought a ticket for a flight to Frankfurt, Germany. A friend drove him to the Vancouver International Airport, but Blair seemed to change his mind at the last minute. He was agitated, convinced that someone would stop him, that he wasn't safe. He left the airport and instead decided to drive. He rented a Nissan Altima and headed for the US border, a man propelled by an unseen force. His destination was unclear, even to him. All he knew was that he had to get away from whatever or whoever was pursuing him. His movements were erratic, the decisions impulsive, painting a picture of a mind in turmoil. The fear was palpable. He told his mother on the phone that someone was going to kill him. He spoke of lies being spread about him at work. He tried to book a ferry to Seattle, but was turned away because the ferry was full. Each closed door seemed to amplify his desperation. He was a man trapped in a nightmare of his own making, or perhaps a nightmare someone else had created for him. Every shadow held a threat, every stranger a potential enemy. The world he had known just days before had transformed into a landscape of danger, and he was running for his life through the middle of it. This period was marked by a profound sense of isolation. Blair was cutting himself off from everyone who could have helped him. He pushed away his girlfriend, left his job without a real explanation, and communicated with his family only in short, panicked bursts. He was alone with his fear, driving into the unknown with a car full of treasure and a heart full of terror. The man who was once a stable, friendly construction foreman was now a fugitive, a ghost haunting the highways of North America, running from a phantom that no one else could see. The question lingered in the air. What could have triggered such a dramatic and sudden transformation? The US-Canada border at Blaine, Washington is a place of routine and regulation. For most, it is a simple checkpoint on a longer journey. For Blair Adams, it was a formidable barrier. When he finally arrived in his rented Nissan on the evening of July 9th, he was flagged by immigration officials. His appearance was disheveled, his story inconsistent. He had a large amount of cash and precious metals, a classic red flag for customs agents. They suspected he might be involved in drug trafficking, a courier moving illicit funds. The very things he had gathered to protect himself now made him a target of suspicion. He was grilled by the authorities. They searched his car, finding the gold, the platinum, the stacks of cash. It was a bizarre find. Blair's explanation did little to clear things up. He claimed he was just visiting a friend in Seattle, but he couldn't provide a name or an address. He was vague, evasive, and clearly agitated. Under the pressure of their questions, his story crumbled. The border agents, finding no evidence of drugs but deeming him a risk to enter the country due to the suspicious amount of undeclared cash, denied him entry into the United States. They turned him back, sending him back into the country he was so desperate to escape. But Blair was not deterred. His fear was greater than any official decree. A few hours later, in the early morning of July 10th, he tried again. This time, he didn't drive his car. He walked across the border, leaving the rented Nissan behind. It's a strange detail. Why abandon the car? Perhaps he thought the vehicle was being tracked. Perhaps he believed that by crossing on foot, he would appear less suspicious, just another person taking a walk. Whatever his reasoning, it worked. This time, he was allowed to pass through. He was now in the United States, a man on foot, with a pocket full of travelers' checks and a mind racing with paranoia. Once in Washington, his journey became even more perplexing. He made his way to the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, some 150 miles south of the border. There, he bought a one-way ticket to Knoxville, Tennessee. The choice of destination remains one of the case's most enduring mysteries. Blair had no known connections to Knoxville, no friends, no family, no history there. It seemed to be a place plucked from a map at random. A destination chosen not for what it was, but for what it wasn't, home. He was a stranger heading to a strange land, hoping to find a sanctuary that existed only in his frightened imagination. Blair Adams arrived in Knoxville, Tennessee on the morning of July 10th. He was a world away from the familiar forests of British Columbia, now adrift in the humid summer air of the American South. The first thing he did was rent a car, a gold Toyota Camry. It seemed he was determined to keep moving, to not stay in one place for too long. He then drove to a Fairfield Inn in the Strawberry Plains area, just east of Knoxville. His behavior at the hotel was anything but ordinary. The front desk clerk, a man named Gerald Papantonio, would later become a key witness, providing a chilling glimpse into Blair's state of mind during his final hours. Papantonio remembered Blair as being jumpy and nervous. Blair approached the counter and asked for a room, but he seemed to have trouble with his payment. He fumbled with his traveler's checks, his hands shaking. He handed over 5 separate $100 checks to pay for a room that cost less than $50. He was in a hurry, constantly looking over his shoulder as if expecting someone to walk in at any moment. He didn't seem to want to stay at the front desk for long, eager to retreat to the anonymity of his room. The clerk found his behavior so odd that it stuck with him, a strange encounter on an otherwise normal day. Blair's stay at the hotel was brief. After checking in, he left his room almost immediately. He returned to the front desk 5 times, each time engaging in a short, fragmented conversation with Papantonio. He never stayed in his room for more than a few minutes. It was as if the 4 walls were closing in on him, offering no safety, no peace. He was a man who couldn't stand still. The hotel, which should have been a refuge, had become just another stop on his frantic, aimless journey. He was paying for a sanctuary he was too afraid to use. Later that evening, Blair checked out. He had spent less than a day in Knoxville. He had a car, a destination unknown, and a growing sense of dread. The clerk at the Fairfield Inn was one of the last people known to have seen him alive. His memory of a nervous, paranoid man handing over a stack of traveller's checks would become a crucial piece of the puzzle. Blair Adams was back on the road, driving his gold Toyota into the Tennessee night, heading toward a violent encounter at a lonely service station just a few miles away. The curtain was about to fall. The last hours of Blair Adams' life are shrouded in a thick fog of mystery. After leaving the Fairfield Inn, he drove his rented Toyota Camry into the night. Where was he going? Did he have a plan, a destination in mind, or was he simply driving, propelled by the relentless engine of his own fear? We know he ended up at a gas station, a small, isolated outpost along the highway. A female attendant there would later report a strange encounter with a man matching Blair's description. She said he seemed flustered, confused. He claimed his car key wasn't working. The woman told investigators that the man was frantic. He insisted the key he had was for the wrong car, even though it was clearly the key for the Toyota he had been driving. He seemed unable to comprehend how to use it. Was this a symptom of his escalating paranoia, a simple task made impossible by a mind in chaos? Or was there another reason for his confusion? He asked for a tow truck, but when the attendant tried to help him, he became agitated and walked away, leaving the car behind. He was now on foot again, alone in the dark on the side of a Tennessee highway. Witnesses at a nearby restaurant also reported seeing a man who looked like Blair. He was pacing, looking agitated, wandering in and out of the establishment. He seemed lost, disoriented. He didn't order food or speak to anyone at length. He was just there, a ghost-like figure haunting the periphery of other people's lives. He was a man coming undone, his grasp on reality slipping with each passing minute. The sanctuary he had traveled thousands of miles to find was proving to be the most dangerous place of all. Sometime during that night, Blair Adams' frantic journey came to a brutal and sudden end. He had run from Canada, crossed a continent, and wandered through the night, all in an effort to escape a perceived threat. But the threat, it seemed, had found him. Or perhaps the threat had been with him all along. The final moments of his life are a blank space in the narrative, a dark void that investigators have never been able to fill. All we know is what was found the next morning, a gruesome discovery that would turn a story of a man on the run into an enduring and chilling homicide investigation. The morning of July 12, 1996, dawned hot and humid in East Tennessee. At a construction site for a new service station off Interstate 40, workers arrived to start their day. The site was quiet, just a barren lot of graded dirt and concrete foundations, but something was out of place. Lying in the parking lot, partially hidden under the cab of a semi-truck, was the body of a man. He was shirtless and shoeless, his jeans and socks still on. It was a shocking and grim discovery. That man was Blair Adams. His long and desperate journey was over. The scene was littered with clues, but they only deepened the mystery. Scattered around Blair's body was a collection of currency, US dollars, Canadian dollars, and German marks. The total amount was nearly $4,000. It was a strange sight. If this was a robbery, the perpetrator had done a very poor job, leaving behind a significant amount of cash. Tucked into his socks was more treasure: gold bars, platinum, and jewelry. The very valuables he had carried with him all the way from Canada were still on his person. The motive, it seemed, was not money. Beside the body, investigators found a black duffel bag. Inside, they discovered maps of the area, travel receipts, and a pair of sunglasses. There was also a fanny pack containing more of his strange hoard gold coins, keys, and other personal items. The gold Toyota Camry he had rented was found parked less than a mile away at the gas station, where he had struggled with the key. The key was a transponder key, a new technology at the time. Police theorized that Blair, in his panicked state, may not have known how to use it properly, leading him to believe it was broken. The scene was a paradox. It had all the hallmarks of a violent struggle, Yet the most obvious motive, robbery, was completely absent. Why would someone attack Blair Adams, beat him so severely that it caused his death, and then leave behind thousands of dollars in cash and precious metals? It made no sense. The evidence at the scene painted a confusing picture. It pointed towards a violent confrontation, but the reason for that confrontation was a complete blank. The man lay dead, surrounded by his treasure, and the questions were just beginning to multiply. The official autopsy of Blair Adams was meant to provide answers, to bring clarity to the chaos of his final moments. Instead, it added new layers of complexity to an already baffling case. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be a single, powerful blow to the stomach. This impact had ruptured his stomach and caused a fatal infection. It was a brutal, deliberate act of violence. This was not an accident. This was murder. But the details surrounding this fatal injury were perplexing and raised more questions than they answered. Beyond the fatal blow, Blair's body was covered in numerous cuts and bruises. These injuries were scattered across his head, face, and legs. They were consistent with a violent struggle, a desperate fight for his life. He had defended himself, or at least tried to, but some of the injuries were unusual. There was a long, surgical-looking cut on his forehead, and other scrapes that seemed difficult to explain in the context of a simple fist fight. The pattern of injuries did not point to a clear, straightforward assault. It was messy, complicated, and strange. One of the most puzzling findings of the autopsy was the absence of any defensive wounds on his hands or arms. In a typical fight, a person would instinctively raise their hands to protect their face and body. The lack of such wounds on Blair was highly unusual. It suggested he might have been caught off guard or perhaps restrained. Another theory, far more disturbing, was that some of the injuries could have been self-inflicted during a state of extreme psychosis. However, the fatal blow to his stomach was almost certainly delivered by another person. Another strange piece of the puzzle was a single, long strand of hair found clutched in Blair's hand. DNA testing was not as advanced in 1996 as it is today, but the hair did not match Blair. It belonged to someone else, an unknown individual who was there with him in his final moments. Was it the hair of his killer? It seemed like a promising lead, a tangible link to the perpetrator. But despite running it through databases for years, the hair has never been matched to anyone. It remains a silent, frustrating clue, a tiny fragment of a story that refuses to be told. In the years since Blair Adams's death, theories have swirled like dust motes in the Tennessee heat, each one attempting to make sense of the senseless. The most straightforward explanation, and the one favoured by some investigators, is that Blair was suffering from a sudden onset of severe paranoia, possibly a schizophrenic break. In this scenario, his fear was entirely internal. He imagined the threats, fled from phantoms, and his erratic behaviour ultimately led him into a random, fatal confrontation with a stranger. Perhaps he provoked someone in his confused state, leading to a fight that ended his life. A second theory suggests that Blair's fears were real. He was, in fact, being targeted. Proponents of this idea point to his job in construction, a field sometimes linked to organised crime or drug activity. Could Blair have stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to see? Was he involved in something illicit that went wrong? This theory would explain his certainty that people were trying to kill him and his desperate need to flee the country. His killer, in this version of events, would have been a professional, someone sent to silence him permanently, but it doesn't quite explain why they would leave all the money and gold behind. A third, more complex theory combines elements of the first two. It posits that Blair was involved in something dangerous, perhaps as a reluctant drug mule. And the pressure of this involvement triggered a genuine paranoid episode. His fear may have been rooted in reality, but it was amplified and distorted by a fracturing mind. He was trying to escape a real threat, but his actions became increasingly irrational and self-defeating. In this scenario, his pursuers could have caught up with him in Tennessee, or he could have run into a different, unrelated danger as a result of his erratic behavior. Finally, there are the darker, more fringe theories. Some speculate about a secret love affair, a jealous rage that followed him across the continent. Others wonder if the strange collection of gold and foreign currency points to something more esoteric, a connection to a cult or a secret society. These ideas are fueled by the lack of concrete evidence and the sheer strangeness of the case. They exist in the shadows of the investigation, whispers that try to fill the vast silent spaces left by the unanswered questions. Each theory offers a potential narrative, but none can fully account for all the bizarre and contradictory facts of Blair Adams's final days. Today, more than 2 decades later, the case of Blair Adams remains open. It is a cold case, a file gathering dust in a Tennessee sheriff's office, but it is not forgotten. It lives on in the minds of those who have studied it, a chilling testament to how quickly a normal life can unravel. The story lingers because it is a perfect mystery, a puzzle with too many pieces that don't fit. Every clue seems to contradict the next. Every path of inquiry leads to a dead end. The silence that surrounds his death is heavy, unsettled, and profound. The central question remains the same: was the danger real, or was it all in his head? If Blair was delusional, what caused such a sudden and catastrophic break from reality? And what are the odds that a man suffering from intense paranoia would randomly run into a killer thousands of miles from home? On the other hand, if he was truly being targeted, who was after him and why? What could he have known or done that would warrant such a relentless pursuit, only for the killer to leave behind a small fortune at the scene of the crime? We are left with a collection of haunting images. A man frantically buying gold, a nervous guest who couldn't stay in his hotel room, a confused driver struggling with a car key, a body found in a lonely parking lot, surrounded by the very treasure he carried to save himself. These fragments of a life cut short refuse to form a coherent picture. They are snapshots of fear, confusion, and violence, but the narrative that connects them is missing, lost to the Tennessee night. The hair found in his hand remains unidentified, a silent witness that cannot speak. The story of Blair Adams is a cautionary tale about the fragility of the human mind and the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of an ordinary life. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes there are no easy answers. Sometimes the truth is not a simple solution, but a tangled web of possibilities, none of them satisfying. A deep, unsettling mystery is all that remains. And somewhere out there, the person or people responsible for the violent end of Blair Adams' desperate journey has kept their secret for a very long time, leaving behind nothing but an unsolved crime and an unnerving, unending silence.